What we've done here is gather together all our information on food and diet for rats to try and make it easier for you. This part of the video is all on dried food, and part 2, which has been done as a separate video, is about fresh foods. So this is what we do and why we do it. The first thing I want to say is we use commercial foods, we don't mix our own. If you are going to mix your own, be very careful to research the nutritional content of the food. Make sure you get the balance between the proteins, the carbohydrates, the vitamins and the minerals correct. Very important, or you won't have healthy rats. The other thing I need to tell you is about storing your food. Always make sure when you're buying commercial food that the packs are not damaged or opened, that they're sealed up and the food is clean and safe, and check that the pack is in date. Don't feed out of date food, because although it may look okay, the vitamin content will be declining after the best by date. Larger packs are cheaper, but always make sure you store all your food in a clean, dry, airtight container to stop it getting mould or contaminating it in any way. Now all the packs will say a different amount of food, so roughly use that as a guide. There is a rough approximate guide of 8 grams of dried food for each 100 gram of body weight for your rat, but no, it can vary. Some rats eat more than others. I always give a bit extra dried food because your rats are not going to overeat dried food. They will only eat what they need. It's the treats that make them fat, and it's the treats and the sugary foods that they're going to overeat on. So they're just like people in that way. We like to eat more of the food we actually like, whereas the boring foods we won't eat so much. The thing to remember is always to change a rat's diet very gradually to avoid stomach upsets if you need to change their food for any reason. And also it's stressful for a rat to suddenly have their food changed. So just put a bit of thought into what you're doing. Remember that rats can't burp or be sick, so be very careful what you feed them. And always test a new food by giving a tiny amount early in the day. Check that your rat's okay after they've eaten it, and wait 24 hours before you give any more of the food, just in case there's any possible delayed reaction or your rats have terrible diarrhea or anything. We always use ceramic bowls because we believe they're the best ones for rat food. They're sturdy, easy to keep clean, they don't make any funny noises. Some of the rats don't like the metal bowls, and plastic can get chewed and knocked over too easily. So some people say you should always split the food into 2 separate meals. Now we actually put most of the food in one go. We know that the rats are going to be hiding it in their bed, and we will remove any stale food from their bed regularly. Every day when we change the bedding, we'll take out the old nuggets and we'll let them stash a few more in, but we always top the bowl up again later in the day. I'd rather waste a bit of food than have a rat go hungry, because many of our rescues have gone hungry in the past. So make sure when you wash the bowls that you wash them once a day. We use hot water, very hot water, and dry them very thoroughly so there's no damp moisture to make the food go soggy. And once a week we really give them a good scrub out with a scouring pad and washing up liquid, and rinse really well. So that's a few little bits about feeding. With the rescue rats, when you get a new rescue rat in, always ask what their favourite foods were and what they've been fed on, because it's very stressful for a rat to go to a new home, even more stressful if the food is suddenly strange. So if we have an older rescue rat, we will keep them on the same food and gradually add a little bit of our own food in and see how they go. But we've never ever stopped them from having the food they've had for the last 2 years, and we would also make sure they get all their favourite treats. And with the young rats that we get as rescues, we would gradually change the food over so they were on the food that we like to use. So what we do for the first 3 months, rats are in very rapid growth. So all our rats have are rat nuggets. Now we've investigated and we believe these are about the best nuggets you can get. Burgess Super Rat Royale. And they will only have rat nuggets and fresh fruit and vegetables. No other treats, nothing else. And that is the recommended amount for an adult rat, which is 20 grams there. Now the animal protein is high in this, it's 16%, which you want high protein while your little baby rats are growing. Natural ingredients, prebiotics, vitamins and minerals, and our baby rats always have plenty of energy and they have lovely beautiful coats, so we're very pleased that that is keeping our babies healthy. Under 5 months there is a possible link to sugar and cancer. So the research we've read said that if you restrict sugar for the first 5 months, your rat's less likely to get cancer at an older age. But obviously genetics play a part of this as well. So we basically, under 3 months, there's no treats at all. When our rats get to 3 months, we do give them a small treat after playtime, and this will be a low sugar breakfast cereal treat, like a little Cheerio or a bran flake, a few Rice Krispies. And that's because we're teaching them the word sweeties, because after playtime on the floor we need to call the rats back in, and rats love their food, especially their sweet food, and they're more likely to come in for a sweetie. So that's why we start introducing the little sweet treats. But we say just one treat after playtime. Once they get to 5 months old, they can have a few more little cereal treats, but we still don't buy them any commercially bought rat treats under 5 months old, and always check the packets for the recommended age group, because a lot of the treats say not under 5 months and some of them say not under 8 months. But it's nice for the rats to have a little treat after playtime, so you can start introducing little treats, you know, from 5 months old. So the rats are still going to be on nuggets as their main food, but at 6 months old we'll start to give them a little one of these Supreme Science Selective Rats. This is your food, this is another complete food, but we'll start to feed this as a treat, and when I've cleaned the rat cage I'll hide a few of these in their bed for them to find, because rats like to find food. So they look quite boring, but the rats really like them. Recommended maximum is 25 grams for each adult rat, soya-based protein 14%, and possibly genetically modified, which is the only thing I don't like, but it has no added sugar and no artificial colours. So they will just have, from 6 months, they'll just be having a little one of those, a couple of those hidden in their bed as a treat. At 9 months old, they will still be on their nuggets as the main food, but we'll start to sprinkle some of the Science Selective onto the nuggets on their food bowl. And this is where you've got to watch out really carefully when you're increasing the Science Selective rat. If your rats start to get itchy and they're always scratching and they don't have mites or anything, their skin seems quite dry and flaky, it could be the soya. Bo couldn't have the soya-based protein, so that's something to watch out for here. And if you've got a rat that's not tolerant of soya, then stop it straight away, because it's going to make her very, very uncomfortable. And we would just carry on with the nuggets. And what we would actually do instead of the soya-based is we would start to introduce some muesli, which we'd normally leave till slightly later dates. But the muesli that we like is the Beeper Extra Vital rat muesli, and that's this one here on the left, this one. Now the Beeper Extra Vital recommended amount, that is 17 grams, which they say for 1 day. It actually doesn't look very much, and I think that would suit some adult rats and others might want a bit more. It contains animal protein, prebiotics and natural ingredients. So that is the muesli we would start to introduce. Usually we would start sprinkling that on the food somewhere between 9 months and 1 year, as just a little sprinkle on the food. And by 1 year the rats would be having 1/3 of the Selective Science and 2/3 nugget, with some of this sprinkled on top to reduce the protein and try and reduce the risk of them getting kidney damage. Now this other muesli is the one we don't like, but our rescue rats often come to us and they've been fed on Reggie Rat. That's the 25 grams. You can see they recommend a bigger amount of food there. I think it's possibly would be a bit much for rats, because the reason they're saying to add more is because with muesli your rats get very fussy and they pick out the bits they want, which is why we won't give muesli to young rats while they're growing. We need them to have all the the balanced diet that they're getting from the nuggets. This is also soya-based protein, 14%, possibly genetically modified, no added sugar but added colour, and you can see the difference in the colour between the more natural muesli and this one which has darker colours. So we're not keen on that, but I say that a lot of the rats do come to us and they've had this Supreme Reggie rat. So we always, you know, as I've said before, we continue to give them the Reggie rats, but we don't like it as much, but we're not going to upset the old rats by taking them off a diet they've always had. So by 18 months we're feeding, providing they're okay with soya, they'll be having a third of the Science Selective, a third of Rat Royale and a third of the Beeper Extra Vital Muesli. And what we're gradually doing at this age is just cutting down even more on the protein for the rats. We're increasing their cereal treats as well, because you need to increase their carbohydrates and the oil content to boost. If you've got rats who are losing weight, you need to boost their you know, their weight up a little bit. So some bread that's been toasted with some or cut into squares and baked with some olive oil, or drizzle a little bit of olive oil over their food. Now that's basically would be the last lot of food change that our rats would have. So that was how we would keep things, unless we have an old rat like Bo who can no longer eat the hard foods, possibly due to arthritis. We used to soften the nuggets in boiling water, leave it to cool, but the centre was still hard and Bo wasn't really getting on very well. So we suggested to us that we try Burns kibble for dogs, and this is what we've got here. This is the hypoallergenic mixer, and this side is the chicken and the brown rice, and there's 10 grams of each in there. It's very important that you mix kibble in with the biscuits, that you don't just give them the meat part, because the protein will be far too high as it's a dog food. And we have always been told you must soak it for rats because it can swell up and get stuck in their throat otherwise. So what we do is we use water that's boiled in the kettle. We cover that the kibble with the boiling water, leave it to soak. It comes up all spongy like this. Make sure you always give it a good stir around so there's no hot spots, and leave it to cool completely before you put it into the rat's cage. And it's very spongy. The rats looks horrible, doesn't smell particularly nice, but the rats love it. Now Bo would eat about half of that in a day. So what we do with this, you can't leave it in for 24 hours, it goes horrible. So you would need to change this at least twice a day, and make sure it's always fresh. If you can change it 3 times a day, even better. But that's the kibble, and always use hot water that's boiled in the kettle, because if you use hot water from the tap it can be contaminated. With other fresh foods you cook yourself, like rice and pasta, leave them to cool, and before you put them in the cage, do the same thing, give them a stir around, check there's no hot spots, and remove them within 1 hour of putting them in the cage, because of bacteria breeding rapidly, and they will go horrible and hard and not very nice. Especially rice. Rice is one of the worst ones for breeding bacteria. And never reheat any foods that you've cooked for your rats. Just cook fresh, give fresh food, remove it within an hour. And I think that's the main things to remember really with the fresh foods. Just trying to think. I think the rest of the information on food will be in the next videos, more concerning the fresh foods and things. The only thing I didn't show you here was the breakfast cereal, but I'm sure most of you know what Cheerios and Brown Flakes are anyway. And I hope you find that helpful. If you have any questions or I haven't explained anything properly, then just let me know.